The alarm on Bay 9 had a pitch Reese Calloway could pick out from 3 rooms, away the same frequency as a heart deciding whether to quit, and she was already halfway toward it when the intercom told her to clear out her locker instead. 15 minutes later, she was fired. Badge surrendered, crossing a parking lot glazed with January ice. That was when the other sound reached her, a low rotor thump that no Rust Belt town like Kessler had any business hearing. The staff at Fairmont County Medical Center had spent 7 months treating the quiet night nurse like a chair nobody had ordered. Not one of them knew that the man bleeding out in the transport dropping through the storm was someone she had already dragged back from the dead, once in a place still stamped classified, or that the worn coin in her pocket carried a call sign the Army had spent years pretending it never issued. But that came later. First, there was the ordinary rot of a Tuesday night shift. Fairmont County sat at the edge of Kessler, like something the town had meant to tear down and then forgot about. The parking lot lights buzzed, and half of them were dead. The east wing still had water stains on the ceiling tiles from a leak nobody had fixed since October. Up on the 4th floor, administration had new carpet and a coffee machine that cost more than a month of Reese's rent. Down in the emergency department, the floor was cracked linoleum that lifted at the seams, and the whole place smelled of bleach laid over something older and sweeter that no amount of scrubbing ever reached. Reese had worked there since the middle of summer. 7 months of nights, 7 months of checking every medication order twice because the day shift never did. 7 months of being nobody until somebody needed a name to pin a mistake on. She was 34 with the kind of pale that comes from living under fluorescent light and sleeping when the sun was up. She kept her hair pulled back tight and her badge clipped square to her collar. She moved through the department without noise, without waste the way water finds the low ground. There was one thing the others might have noticed if any of them had been paying attention. Her hands never shook. Not during a code, not during a bad trauma, not when the monitors were all screaming at once and everyone else had gone loud and clumsy. And she always stood with her back near a wall, and she always turned her head a certain way when someone spoke to her from the left, angling her right ear toward the sound, like she was listening harder than most people bothered to. Calloway, the voice cut across the nurse's station. Reese closed the supply drawer she had been counting and turned. Marlene Tobin stood with her arms folded and her jaw set. Tobin was 51, built thick through the shoulders, and she had run these nights for 11 years with the warmth of a parking enforcement officer. She had a way of saying a person's name that turned it into an accusation. "You wrote up Bay 6, Tobin said. "I documented a wrong side chest tube," Reese said. "It was on the chart before the film came back. I flagged it." "You flagged it." Tobin stepped closer. "That is the 4th report you have filed this month. You know what that does to my numbers. It keeps the tube out of the wrong lung," Reese said. Around them, the department ground through its usual low chaos. A man in Bay 2 was arguing with the ceiling. Somebody's toddler was working up to a scream in triage. The old espresso machine in the break room hissed and popped like it was dying by degrees. None of the other staff looked up. Nobody ever looked up when Tobin started in on the quiet one. "You think being careful makes you special," Tobin said. "You think writing everybody up makes you some kind of saint. It makes me a nurse," Reese said. "It makes you a problem." Dr. Preston Vale drifted past with a tablet in one hand and a soda in the other. Vale was the sort of emergency physician who had stopped learning around his 5th year and had been coasting on volume and confidence ever since. He did not slow down. "Tobin," he said, "get Bay 4 turned over. I have a chest pain rolling in." He was gone before either of them answered. Reese pulled a fresh set of gloves and went to strip the bed nobody else wanted. And Tobin let her, because giving her the worst of it was the whole point of the arrangement. The drunks who swung, the beds fouled past the edge of what a normal person could stand. Reese took all of it with the same flat calm that drove Tobin half out of her mind, because showing anything at all just handed them a weapon, and she had learned that lesson a long way from here, in a place where showing fear could get a person killed. Bay 4 smelled like the inside of an old coat. She snapped on the gloves and got to work. Rough crowd tonight. She turned. Diz Alvarez leaned in the doorway, the one emergency tech in the building who had bothered to learn her name and use it. He was 27, still built like the linebacker he had been in a smaller life, with an easy grin that did not belong in a room like this. "Tobin has it in for you," he said. "Tobin has it in for the weather," Reese said. "Yeah, but she really does not like you." Dez folded his arms. "Why is that?" "I follow the rules. Nobody follows the rules." Reese wiped down the side rail. "I do." He watched her a moment, the way a person watches something they cannot quite figure out. "You know what is strange about you, Calloway? You are always half waiting for something. Like you hear a sound, the rest of us do not." Her hands paused for a beat over the rail. Then she went back to wiping it down. "I am waiting for this shift to end," she said. "Liar," Dez said, but there was no meanness in it. The radio on his hip crackled. Dispatch called an incoming ambulance a fall from height 7 minutes out. Dez pushed off the frame. "Duty calls," he said, and left her to it. She finished cleaning in silence. The thing was, he was not wrong. She had been waiting for 7 months, waiting for someone to ask the one question she could not answer without unspooling the rest. Waiting for the past to stop feeling like a stone she carried behind her ribs every time she heard a rotor overhead. But Kessler was not a town that asked questions. People showed up, did as little as they could, collected a check, and pretended the rest was not their business. That had suited her fine. Mostly. The ambulance rolled into the bay a few minutes early. She heard the doors before she saw anything, the pneumatic. Hiss, the wheels squealing on the wet floor, the paramedic already talking fast. Male 40s roofer 20 foot, fall onto frozen ground chest injury. Vale jogged alongside the gurney looking more awake than she had seen him all week. Tobin barked contradictory orders. 2 other nurses appeared from nowhere. This was the rhythm of the place, long stretches of nothing broken by a sudden hard pull of adrenaline. Reese started to turn back to the supply room. Then she heard it under all the noise, a wet catch in the man's breathing that did not belong, the sound of air going where air should not go. She was moving before she had decided to move. "Hold on," she said. Vale looked up, already irritated. "What?" She stepped to the gurney and put 2 fingers to the side of the man's neck, then laid the flat of her hand against the upper left of his chest and felt the gyve under it, the way the tissue crackled like bubble wrap. His trachea had shifted a hair off center. His color was going the wrong way, gray at the lips, and the monitor was starting to slide. "Tension on the left," she said. "He's not moving air on that side. He needs decompression now, not after the film." Vale stared at her. "You do not diagnose," he said. "You chart. His pressure is dropping," Reese said, and she did not raise her voice, and her hands did not move an inch off the man's chest. "You have got about 90 seconds before he arrests. Your call." For a moment, nobody moved. You did not talk to Preston Vale like that. Not as a night nurse, 7 months into the job. Not with Tobin standing right there with murder in her eyes. Then the monitor gave a long, falling tone. The oxygen number dropped through the 80s, and Vale swore and grabbed for a needle, and the roofer got to keep breathing. When it was over, when the man was stable and rolling toward imaging, Vale straightened up with his face red and said, "Next time, Calloway, you wait until I ask." Then he walked off, and the rest of the team followed him, and Dez shot her a look on his way past that said, "Nice catch." Tobin just stared. Reese went back to the supply room. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. But something old and cold had woken up under her sternum because she had done it again. Stepped forward when the smart move was to stay small. Shown them exactly what she could do in a place that punished anyone who could do anything. She had made herself visible. She reached into her scrub pocket without thinking and closed her fingers around the coin she kept there. Brass worn, smooth as a river stone. The words on its face rubbed down to ghosts. She did not look at it. She never looked at it on shift. She just held it for a second, the way another person might touch a scar, and then she let it go and got back to work. She had one more hour of quiet before the phone at the nurse's station rang, and Tobin said, without any effort to hide how much she was enjoying it, "Director Doyle wants to see you." Now, Warren Doyle's office was on the 4th floor in the administrative wing, where the carpet swallowed the sound of your feet, and the air smelled like good coffee instead of bleach. Reese had been up here exactly once on the day she was hired when Doyle had barely glanced at her, before signing the form that let her in. Now he sat behind a desk, too big for the room, a man of 57, with silver hair, and a tan that came out of a booth, and a smile that never once involved his eyes. Tobin stood at his shoulder like a prison matron who had finally been handed the keys to the right cell. Nobody offered Reese a chair. She stood. Nurse Calloway Doyle said, and his voice was smooth as the carpet. "We need to talk about your conduct tonight." Reese said nothing. Dr. Vale filed a complaint. He says you overrode him in front of the trauma team, undermined his authority in front of staff. "I identified a tension pneumothorax before the patient arrested," Reese said. "That is not your call to make. A man was about to die. I said so. He is alive. Those are the facts." Doyle leaned back. The chair took his weight with a soft leather sigh. "The facts," he said, "are whatever this hospital needs them to be. You are a floor nurse. Dr. Vale is a board-certified physician with 14 years of experience. Your job is to follow, not to lead." "My job is patient care," Reese said. "Your job," Doyle said slowly, "savoring it, is whatever I tell you it is." The room felt smaller than it was. Tobin's mouth had curled into something close to pleasure. Doyle laid a folder on the desk and opened it with 2 fingers, like he was turning over a card he already knew would win. This is not the first time, he went on. 4 incident reports in 8 weeks. Multiple complaints about your attitude. A consistent failure to be a team player. Those reports documented safety violations, Reese said. Those reports made this hospital look bad. There it was. She felt the thing under her ribs shift again, the old anger she had spent 7 months keeping folded and boxed. "So patient safety matters less than the quarterly," she said. "Do not put words in my mouth. Then stop feeding me the ones you want back." She took a slow breath and let it out through her nose. "I have watched this department for 7 months. I have seen expired drugs left on the crash cart in Bay 7. I have seen staffing ratios that would fail any inspection that was actually an inspection. I have seen incident reports go into your inbox and never come out again. You run this place like a show ledger, not a hospital, and one night it is going to kill somebody, and it is not going to be the somebody you can afford." The silence that followed had weight. Then Doyle smiled, slow and cold, a man laying down the card at last. "Clear out your locker," he said. "You are done." She did not move. "You are firing me for reporting safety concerns. I am firing you for insubordination. Effective now." He pressed a button on his desk phone and told security to come up. Tobin looked like a woman watching a gift unwrap itself. Reese stood there and let the seconds pass, and she thought about 7 months of keeping her head down and how it had bought her exactly nothing, because places like this did not want a good nurse. They wanted a quiet one. "You are going to regret this," she said, not as a threat, just flat the way you would read a weather report. Doyle laughed. "Is that so?" "It usually is." 2 security guards came to the door, both of them, uneasy, neither of them wanting any part of it. The younger one, a kid named Reyes, whose nameplate she had noticed weeks ago, would not meet her eyes. She turned and walked out between them with her spine straight and her face empty, and rode the elevator down without a word. The staff locker room was in the basement, next to the room where they stored the things families left behind. She cleaned out her locker in under 2 minutes because 7 months had not left her much. A spare pair of shoes, a rain jacket, a paperback she read on her breaks cracked down the spine. She handed her badge to the guard at the security desk. Reyes finally spoke low, so his partner would not hear. For what it is worth, he said that guy in Bay 9 last month, the old vet, you were the only one who would touch him. I saw it. Reese looked at him for a second. Thanks, she said, and meant it. And then she pushed through the double doors into the cold. She did not go straight to her car. There was a hallway she passed on the way out, a short corridor off the main department, and as she went by, she heard a voice she recognized, and slowed without deciding to. Sam Ortega was maybe 23, a new graduate, 3 weeks off orientation, still wearing her badge, like it might be taken away if she set it down wrong. She was backed against the wall by the medication room door, and Tobin's second in command, a charge nurse named Kessler, that half the staff joked, shared a name with the town because they were both cold, and Gray was leaning over her with a tablet. I just need your signature, Kessler was saying. It is a formality. The care was given, the charting just fell behind. You witnessed it. You sign it. We are square. I wasn't on that night, Sam said. Her voice was doing the thing a voice does when a person is trying to sound braver than they feel. I do not remember the patient. I do not think I can sign for care I did not see. You want to make it through your first year here or not? Reese stopped walking. She had no badge, no standing, no reason on earth to insert herself into a hospital that had just thrown her out into an ice storm. She had exactly the wrong number of reasons to keep walking to her car and let Kessler and Doyle and Tobin have their building. She turned into the corridor anyway. Everything okay here? She said. Kessler straightened. This does not concern you, Calloway. You were terminated 20 minutes ago, I heard Reese said. She looked past Kessler at Sam at the tablet, at the way the girl's hand had frozen an inch above the screen. She kept her voice level and easy, the tone she used on frightened patients. You do not sign anything you did not see, she said to Sam. Not tonight, not ever, no matter who is standing over you. If the charting fell behind the person who gave the care signs it. That is the whole rule. It is not complicated, and it is not yours to fix. Kessler's face went dark. Get out of my department. It is not your department, Reese said. It is not really Doyle's either, though he does not know that yet. She held Kessler's eyes 1 beat longer than was comfortable, then looked back at Sam. Write down the date, she said, quietly. Write down who asked you and what they asked. Put it somewhere that is not the hospital. You may never need it. But if you do, you will be glad it exists. Then she walked out for real past the triage desk and the buzzing dead lights and pushed through the ambulance bay doors into the night. The cold hit like a slap. January in Kessler was the kind of cold that got into the fillings of your teeth. Her car sat in the back lot under one of the broken lights, a 15-year-old sedan that burned oil and made a knocking sound she could not afford to chase down. Freezing rain had glazed the whole lot in a thin skin of ice that caught what little light there was and threw it back gray. She was halfway across when she heard it. She stopped. She stopped breathing, actually the way a body does when some part of it older than thought recognizes a sound before the rest catches up. Low rhythmic felt in the chest more than heard, and under it a second layer that her ruined left ear could not place, but her whole nervous system could. Heavy vehicles moving fast, and above them coming down through the storm, the beat of rotors. She turned around. 3 dark SUVs came around the corner of the building in a tight formation, headlights cutting the freezing rain into slanting lines. Behind them, a military transport box, bodied, and mud brown against the ice. Behind that, 2 more SUVs. They were not slowing down. Her pulse spiked, and something in her went very quiet and very fast. At the same time, the way it used to, the old order sliding into place under everything else. Assess, sort, move. She had heard convoys come in hot like this before, in places where the sound meant either rescue or catastrophe, and usually both at once. The vehicle slid up to the emergency entrance in a choreography that no civilian crew could have managed on ice. Doors flew. Men in tactical gear poured out and moved with the flat economy of a unit that had done this 100 times, in worse places than a hospital parking lot. Reese found herself walking back toward the building. She should not. She had no badge, no authority, no reason. Her feet carried her anyway, because she knew that posture, knew the way they scanned the roof lines and the corners, even while they hauled a stretcher down out of the transport, knew it the way you know your own name in the dark. Then the power went out. Every light in Fairmont County died at once. The buzzing lot lamps, the red glow of the exit signs, the whole east wing gone black between one heartbeat and the next. The ice storm had finally found the line it wanted. For a second, there was nothing but the rotor beat and the shouting and the white of the SUV headlights throwing enormous shadows up the side of the building. Somewhere inside, an emergency generator coughed and caught, and a thin, ugly half-light came up in a few windows and nowhere near enough of them. Reese was already moving through the doors. She could hear it all going wrong in the dark, the confusion, a monitor somewhere shrieking on battery. Tobin's voice cracking up an octave veil, demanding to know who the hell had authorized armed men in his department. She pushed past a security guard who did not even try to stop her, and followed the sound and the smell of blood into the trauma bay. And there, in the shaking beam of a handheld light, she saw the man on the stretcher, older than she remembered, harder. Half his face was under a mask of blood, but she knew him. The rank on his soaked tactical vest read Major now. It had read Lieutenant the last time she saw it on a boy who had been terrified and hiding it well in the back of a burning vehicle in a valley, whose name was still classified, while she held pressure on a torn artery and told him bad jokes to keep him awake. She had not let him die then. Now, Major Cole Drager was bleeding out on a battery-powered light in the dark heart of a hospital that had fired her 25 minutes ago, and every instinct she had spent 7 months burying stood up all at once. Move. The word came out of Reese flat and hard, and it cut through the dark room the way a blade cuts through smoke. Every head turned. In the swinging beam of the handheld light, she saw their faces catch on her, the fired night nurse in a rain jacket with no badge, and for half a second, the whole bay stalled. Tobin found her voice first. "What are you doing in here? Somebody get security. His pressure is bottoming out," Reese said, already crossing to the stretcher. She was not asking permission. She had stopped asking permission the moment she saw his face. "He is bleeding somewhere you have not found yet, and you are running out of light and time at the same rate." Vale had a penlight in his teeth, and both hands slick with a central line kit he could not seem to seat. "You do not work here," he said, around the light, and the words came out mangled and furious. "Then fire me twice," Reese said. Her hands were already on Drager. She did it by feel, the way she had learned to work when there was no light and no lab and no time, the way the army had drilled into her until it lived below thought. His abdomen was rigid under her palms, tight and swollen, where it should have been soft, the belly of a man filling up with his own blood. She pressed low on the left and felt him flinch even through the shock, and she pressed again and felt the give that told her the story. "Spleen," she said. "Probably the spleen, maybe the liver too." He took the pressure wave and the shrapnel both. "He is bleeding into his belly faster than you can pour it back in through that line, and no line you place is going to fix it. He needs a surgeon and an operating room, and he needs them in the next few minutes, or he needs you to open his chest right here on this stretcher." "Open his chest," Vale said. The penlight fell out of his mouth. "Are you out of your mind?" "I am out of patience," Reese said. She looked up, found the two operators standing against the wall, faces locked into the professional blankness that never quite hid the fear under it. "Where is his wound?" she said to them. "Field report." Fast. The bigger of the two answered on reflex the way a soldier answers a voice that sounds like command. "IED," he said. "Shrapnel to the torso left side." Medic packed what he could reach in the field. He was talking. He stopped talking about 20 minutes out. "Because he is bleeding where nobody can pack it," Reese said. She turned to Vale. "Call the operating room. Tell them a hemorrhaging trauma is coming up now, not in 5 minutes now, and if the on-call surgeon is at home in bed, then wake him and start scrubbing whoever is closest. Or grab a scalpel and stay here with me. Those are the 2 doors. Pick one." Vale stared at her like she had grown a second head. Tobin grabbed for Reese's arm. "Get her out of here before she kills someone," Tobin said. "Let her work." The voice came from the doorway, and it did not belong to anyone in the department. It carried the way a voice carries when it has spent a career being obeyed. Tobin's hand dropped off Reese's arm on its own. A man stood in the frame of the door, backlit by the SUV headlights, bleeding in through the ambulance bay glass. He was maybe 50 built, like he still put in the work, with a steel gray crew cut, and a face that looked like weather had done most of the shaping. The eagle on his collar caught the light. His uniform was crisp, despite the storm and the hour. "Sir Tobin said this woman was terminated tonight. She has no privileges here. I do not care what she has," the colonel said. He was not looking at Tobin. He was looking at Reese, and something in his face had gone very still, the look of a man reading a page he had not expected to find in the book. He looked at her hands on the wounded man, at the way her whole body had squared itself over the stretcher, at the fact that hers were the only steady hands in the room. "Do what she says," he told Vale. "That man is a serving officer, and he is not going to die in this room because you were too proud to take a nurse's read. Call the operating room. Now." Vale grabbed the phone, and then, because she had a minute and no more, and because her hands knew the work well enough to do it without her, some part of Reese slipped its leash and went back. It had been a valley with a name she was not allowed to say out loud 3 years and a whole life ago. The vehicle had gone up on a buried charge and rolled and caught fire, and she had gone in through the gunner's hatch because the doors were pinned, and she had found the young lieutenant with his leg open to the bone and an artery pumping his life out onto the floor of a burning truck. She had put her whole weight on the wound and held it there while the ammunition cooked off in the wreck behind them, and she had told him a stupid story about a dog she used to have to keep his eyes open, and she had not let go for 40 minutes while they waited on the bird. He had lived. She had walked away with her ears ringing so hard she could not hear the medevac land, and by the next week, the ringing on the left side hadn't stopped, and it never fully did. Somewhere in there, a piece of the truck had gone through her forearm, and the surgeons had put a plate in it. And now when the weather turned cold like this, the metal ached like a tooth. She wore long sleeves. She did not talk about it. She had spent 3 years teaching herself not to hear the sound the memory made. She came back to the trauma bay between one breath and the next. Her hands had never stopped moving. She had adjusted the drip, repositioned the leads called out an order that 2 of the nurses followed without thinking, because their hands wanted somebody to tell them what to do. On the monitor, the pressure caught and held, and began the slow climb back toward something a body could live on. Coin, she thought, without meaning to her fingers brushing the shape of it through her jacket pocket where it had ridden all night. Not yet. Later. She let the thought go. The surgical team came down 4 minutes later with a stretcher and a battery lantern, and the particular irritation of people pulled out of a warm break room in the middle of a blackout. That irritation lasted exactly as long as it took them to see the state of the man on the table and the armed operator standing over him. Then their faces changed, and they moved. They took Drager toward the elevator that the generator was still feeding, and the doors closed on him, and the trauma bay went suddenly ringingly quiet. Reese stepped back from the empty stretcher. Her hands at last were still. There was blood to the wrists on both of them. The colonel had not moved from the door. Now he crossed the room to her, unhurried. And up close, he was even larger than he had seemed, and his eyes had the flat, assessing quality of a man who had spent decades learning to read people fast. Because reading them slow got people killed. "You have a name," he said. Reese hesitated. "Calloway," she said. "Reese Calloway." Something moved behind his eyes. Not surprise exactly. More like a piece dropping into a slot he had already cut for it. "You were in," he said. It was not a question. "What branch? What job?" Her throat tightened. "Army," she said. 68 Whiskey. Combat medic. He nodded slowly once. 2 tours, he said. "Where?" "Wherever they sent me," she said. The colonel looked at her a moment longer. Then he reached into his jacket and took out a slim tablet. And even in the half-light, she could see it wake up under his thumb. And she felt the ground she had been standing on for 7 months begin very quietly to give way. The colonel turned the tablet so she could see it. Her own face looked back at her. Younger by 3 years, and harder by 10 in a uniform, under a caption that read, "Sergeant First Class, Reese Calloway." 68W. Below her name, a line of text she had spent 3 years trying not to think about. Silver Star. 2 Purple Hearts. Below that, a file began to open itself. Mission summaries, casualty logs, after action reports and photographs. A burning vehicle in a dry valley. A dust-colored patrol base with the light going flat and orange behind it. And one of a young lieutenant with his arms slung around a mud-caked female medic, both of them grinning like idiots who did not yet know what the year had planned for them. Reese's hand started to shake, just slightly, for the first time all night. The colonel watched them do it and did not comment. He closed the tablet. "Colonel Ray Sturgis," he said. "That man they just took upstairs is Major Cole Drager. He commands the team that came in with him. And according to his own file, the only reason he has a file this long is that a medic pulled him out of a burning vehicle in a place I am also not allowed to name, and kept him alive on the floor of it for 40 minutes. He looked at her. "The medic's name is redacted in 3 different databases. It took me about 4 seconds standing in that doorway to fill in the blank." Reese said nothing. "You disappeared after your discharge," Sturgis said. "Changed the spelling of your name. Moved twice. Took the worst shift in the worst hospital in a town nobody drives to on purpose." He tilted his head. "Why?" "I did not want to be found," Reese said. "Too bad." He said it without cruelty. "You want to know what I think? I think you tried to leave it in a box in the dark and get a normal job and be a normal person. And I think you found out the hard way that it does not stay in the box. It came up in you the second you heard the rotors. It came up in you the second his belly told you the truth about the spleen. You cannot switch off what you are just because you would rather be something quieter." Somewhere in the building, a code alarm began to sound thin and insistent on generator power. Reese's eyes flicked toward it and back. The old sorting reflex, the head count that never quite shut off. "He's going to make it," Sturgis said, following her look. "Not this one. His man. The one upstairs. Because you would not walk out of a room you no longer worked in. The Army does not forget people who do that, Sergeant. Whether you forgot yourself or not." He walked away then toward the operators by the wall and left her standing in a trauma bay, lit by a dying lantern, with blood drying on her hands, and 7 months of careful invisibility coming apart around her, like a wall giving way to water. Tobin was staring at her as though she had never seen her before. Vale had gone the color of old paper. The 2 nurses who had followed her orders were whispering with their heads together, and one of them kept glancing over like Reese might do something else astonishing at any moment. The elevator opened. Warren Doyle came out of it fast, his good suit thrown on crooked over a golf shirt, his tan looking sickly in the emergency light. "Colonel," he said, and his voice was pitched to Carrie. "I am going to have to insist your men clear my hospital. This is a civilian facility you cannot simply commandeer. There are regulations, there are." Sturgis turned around. Whatever was on his face made Doyle stop talking mid-sentence. "This facility is under federal emergency authority, as of the moment my transport crossed the property line," Sturgis said. "You will have the paperwork within the hour. Until then, your staff cooperates fully, or I detain the ones who do not for obstruction, and let the lawyers sort out the apologies later. Are we clear?" Doyle's mouth opened and shut. "You cannot do that," he managed. "It is already done," Sturgis said, and turned his back on him, which was its own kind of sentence. The next 4 hours passed in a strange, suspended time. Reese should have gone home. She had no reason to stay, and every reason to go. She stayed. She washed the blood off her hands in a supply room sink, and then she sat in the surgical waiting area, and the operators sat around her, and somewhere in the first hour, it stopped being strange that they did. They did not talk much. One of them, a staff sergeant with forearms like bridge cable, brought her a cup of the terrible machine coffee without being asked, and set it down beside her and said, "Doc," the way you would say it to someone you had known a long time. She had not been called that in 3 years. It went into her chest and lodged there. Sturgis turned a corner of the waiting room into an operations post, laptops, and a hardened tablet spread across the low table. A low murmur of radio traffic. Reese watched the doors to the operating suite, and did not let herself think about the last time she had sat like this in a plywood box of a room, a world away, waiting to learn whether a boy named Eli Marsh had made it, and learning that he had not. She did not think about it. She was very practiced at not thinking about it. Near hour 3, Sam Ortega found her. The new graduate had a cardigan pulled over her scrubs against the chill of a building running on half power, and she sat down 2 seats over, with the wary care of someone approaching a fire she was not sure the size of. "They are saying you were Army," Sam said. "Like real Army. Like the kind with the medals." Reese looked at her. "It was a long time ago," she said. Sam turned her cup around in her hands. "That thing you told me," she said. "In the hallway, about not signing." She swallowed. "Kessler came back after you left. Told me you were a troublemaker and a liar, and that I should forget everything you said." She looked up. "But I wrote it down." "Date name what she asked." "Put it in a note on my personal phone like you said." "Was that stupid?" "No," Reese said. "That was the least stupid thing anybody has done in this building tonight." The girl let out a breath that was half a laugh and mostly relief. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Good." Reese studied her, this kid 3 weeks off orientation, who had held her ground against a superior in a dark hallway because a stranger with no badge had told her the rule out loud. She recognized something in her, the particular stubbornness of a person who had not yet learned that the world would punish her for being right. She hoped it did not get taught out of her. She suspected it might be too late for that, already in the good way. "Keep your head down for a couple of days," she said. "Do your job clean. Do not sign anything you did not see. If anyone pushes you, say you have to check with your preceptor, and then you walk away. You do not have to win the fight tonight. You just have to not lose it." Sam nodded like she was memorizing it. The operating room doors opened a little before dawn. Everyone stood. The surgeon came out still in his cap mask, pulled down, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in his face. "He made it," he said. "Ruptured spleen laceration to the liver, better than 2 liters lost before we got in. But he is stable. We have got him." Sturgis nodded once the way a man nods when he has been holding a thing very still for a long time and can finally set it down. The operators around Reese let out a collective breath she had not realized they were all holding. The surgeon looked around the room until he found her. "You the one who called it downstairs," he said. "Spleen and liver both in the dark off a belly exam. Reese said nothing. He held her gaze a second, then shook his head slowly, and there was no sarcasm in it at all. "Nice call," he said, and went to write his notes. Sturgis crossed to her. "He is asking for you," he said, quietly. "He woke up in recovery. First thing out of his mouth was your name. Not the name on your badge. The one from before." "I do not think Reese started. I'm not asking," Sturgis said, but gently, the way you overrule someone you have decided to respect. "Come on, Sergeant. Let the man thank the person who kept him breathing." Twice. She went. She followed him down a corridor, lit every third fixture, past a young operator standing guard, who came to something like attention when she passed, which she did not know what to do with. In the recovery bay, Cole Drager lay gray and taped and tubed, and when the door opened, his eyes came unstuck and found her, and his cracked lips moved. "Vesper," he said. His voice was a ruin. "Knew it was you. Felt your hands. Nobody else works like that in the dark." The call sign hit her like cold water. Nobody had said it out loud in 3 years. She stood at the foot of his bed and could not make her mouth work. "Told them," Drager rasped. "Told the whole team. Best medic I ever had over me. Pulled me out of that truck. Pulled me out again tonight." He tried to smile, and it came out crooked with the drugs. "Do not know how you ended up in a dump like this, Doc. But God, I am glad you were standing in that lot." Reese's hands at the foot of his bed had begun to shake again, and this time she did not try to make them stop. They let her sit with him until the drugs pulled him back under, and then Sturgis walked her to a small family conference room on the surgical floor, the kind of room hospitals keep for conversations nobody wants to have. He closed the door and sat down and gestured her to a chair, and this time she took it because her legs had decided the matter for her. "You have questions," he said. "How long have you known where I was?" Reese said. 4 months. He watched her take that in. "We did not come to Kessler for you, if that helps. We came because of the hospital. But once we started pulling the thread, your name was on the far end of it, and I recognized it, and I decided to leave you where you were." "Leave me as what?" "As exactly the thing we needed." Sturgis leaned back. "The Army flagged Fairmont County last spring. 3 veterans died here inside 7 weeks. All of them deaths that should not have happened. All of them tidied away in the administrative wash before the families could get an answer worth having. The VA started asking questions, and the questions turned into a pattern, and the pattern started to smell like fraud and cost-cutting dressed up as care." He tapped the table once. "Federal investigators went in quietly, and every incident report a certain night nurse filed went straight into their file." The cold came back into her chest, slower this time. "So you used me." "We gave you a job," Sturgis said. "You chose how to do it. Nobody made you document the expired drugs on the Bay 7 cart. Nobody made you flag the wrong side chest tube tonight. You did that because it is what you are. Doyle spent 7 months trying to shut you up, and every move he made to bury you just dug his hole another foot deeper, because you kept a record he did not know was going anywhere." Reese stared at the tabletop. "I did not know it was going anywhere either. That is why it worked." He says it without apology. "A canary that knows it is a canary sings different. You just sang." She thought about 7 months of writing careful reports into a system she had assumed was a shredder. Every one of them a stone she had dropped into a well she thought had no bottom. And all of them had landed somewhere after all. "I read your whole file," Sturgis said into the quiet. "Including the parts you would rather did not exist." "Do not," Reese said. "The valley. The ambush the week after you pulled Drager out. 7 wounded 1 aircraft down no evac window for 4 hours. You held a casualty collection point by yourself the whole time. Took a round through the plate and a piece of a vehicle through your arm and kept working with both. 6 of those 7 walked out because of you. She said nothing. You lost one, Sturgis said. Specialist Eli Marsh, 19. Bled out from a wound to the leg before you could get to him because you were 3 men deep in other people at the moment he needed you. He let that sit. That is the one you carry. Not the 6. The 1. Reese's hands had closed into fists on the table. I said, do not. You became a nurse to keep saving people. You could not save that day. Sturgis said, not unkindly, just plainly, a man saying a true thing because someone needed to hear it. You worked nights in a dying hospital because it felt like penance, and penance felt like the closest thing to peace you could reach. You cannot save your way out of that valley, Sergeant. It does not work. But it made you the exact person who would not walk past a man bleeding in a parking lot, and tonight that saved Cole Drager's life. So maybe stop treating the thing that keeps you up at night like it is only a wound. The generator hum came up faint through the walls. Somewhere, a call bell rang, and was answered. Reese finally looked up. What happens now, she said. Now the house gets cleaned. He set the tablet on the table between them and did not open it. But there is a piece I have to tell you before you hear it in a hallway, because it is going to land hard. Doyle is not the top of this. He is a middle manager. The reports you filed, the deaths, the billing. All of it runs up through a man named Curtis Renner, who sits on the state medical board and has spent the last 2 years making sure every inspection of this place came back clean. And it runs sideways into at least 5 other hospitals doing the exact same thing. Veterans' targeted records altered deaths turned into invoices. He met her eyes. You did not expose one bad administrator tonight. You lit the fuse under a network. Reese absorbed it the way she had learned to absorb bad news in the field flat and fast sorting it before it could sink its weight into her. How much, she said. Conservatively over 4 years, north of $12 million. Renner's cut is the largest we can trace. Sturgis's jaw tightened. And here is the part you are not going to like. Men who steal that much and hide it that well do not fold quietly when the light comes on. They will come at the loudest witness first, and after tonight, Sergeant, that is you. The door opened without a knock. Doyle stood there, and he was not alone. 2 men in gray suits flanked him, and behind them, a woman, Reese did not recognize, silver-haired and composed, holding a leather folio. Doyle's face had a triumphant tightness to it that did not reach the fear underneath. Colonel Doyle said, I have been on the phone with the state board and with hospital counsel, and I am afraid we have a serious problem. That woman is not an employee of this hospital. She was terminated last night. She entered a trauma bay without authorization. She performed procedures without privileges. She endangered a patient. He pointed at Reese, and his hand was not quite steady. I am pressing charges, trespass, practicing medicine without a license. I will see to it she never works in healthcare again. The hallway went dead silent. Then the silver-haired woman spoke, and her voice was quiet and even, and it stopped the room. I would think very carefully about that, Mr. Doyle, she said. Doyle turned. Who are you? Sharon Frost, State Inspector General. I have been in this building since roughly the moment your night nurse started talking to a very interested young man 3 weeks ago. She opened the folio. And I have spent the last several hours with your billing records, your inspection reports, and your personnel files, and I have found enough to hold you here rather than let you leave. So before you press charges against the only person in this hospital who appears to have been doing her job, you may want to consult a different kind of lawyer. Doyle's tan went gray. His legs seemed to lose interest in holding him, and one of the men in suits took his elbow less to steady him than to make sure he stayed. Reese watched it happen and felt none of the satisfaction she might have expected. She was watching the woman's face. Frost's face, the particular stillness of it, the way her eyes moved once around the room and cataloged every person in it, including Reese, and something old and wary in the back of Reese's mind put a small mark next to her name and did not explain why. Sturgis was already on his feet. "Reese," he said. His voice had changed. Whatever satisfaction was in the room, he was not feeling it either. "We need to talk. Now. Not here." "Why?" she said. He glanced at Frost, then back at Reese, and lowered his voice so only she could hear. "Because I have met the Inspector General for this state," he said. "And that is not her." They did not get to have the conversation. Later, Reese would understand. Why? In the hour after Frost walked in, the building filled with people, real federal agents this time, a woman named Nita Okafor, who ran them with a clipped economy. Reese respected on sight. Frost, or whoever she was, moved through it all with the same composed stillness, helpful and forthcoming. And when Okafor's people finally sat her down in a room, she came away with the polite fury of a professional who has just realized the person she was chatting with had walked out a side door 20 minutes before. By then, the sun was up, and Cole Drager was stable enough to be moved to a real room, and the storm had blown itself out and left Kessler glazed and glittering and treacherous under a hard blue sky. Reese had not slept. She sat in the family room with a fourth cup of machine coffee going cold in her hands, while Sturgis and Okafor traded the pieces they each held across the low table, like players squaring a hand. The woman who called herself Sharon Frost Okafor said does not exist. The real state inspector general is a man named Aldous, who has been in Washington all week. Whoever she is, she had building credentials good enough to pass 3 checkpoints. She knew exactly which records to be seen looking at, and she is now gone. She looked at Reese. She spent about 6 hours here, most of it near Doyle, and Doyle, as of 40 minutes ago, is dead. Reese set the cup down. What? Found unresponsive in the holding room downtown where they were processing him. Sturgis's face was carved stone, made to look like he did it himself. He did not. Somebody wanted him quiet before he decided cooperating was smarter than loyalty. The room seemed to tilt a few degrees and settle. Reese thought about the still woman with the leather folio, the way her eyes had moved around the room and marked everyone in it. The small, wary flag her own instincts had raised for no reason she could name at the time. Her instincts, it turned out, had known before she did. They usually did. She came to watch Doyle, Reese said slowly. Not to expose him. To be in the building when he died so it would look like oversight caught up with a guilty man. That is our theory, Okafor said. She was here to close a loose end and dress it as justice. And she stood 10 feet from you for several minutes. Sturgis leaned forward. Which is why from this point, you have a detail, whether you want one or not. I do not, Reese said. You do not get a vote, he said. You are not a witness against a bad administrator anymore. You are the loudest witness against a network that just killed a man to protect itself. You are exactly the kind of loose end they specialize in. She wanted to argue. She was too tired to, and more than that. Some cold, clear part of her that had run casualty collection points under fire recognized the arithmetic and did not like it. She let it go. That afternoon, over her objection, and largely without her participation, her life began to rearrange itself around her. Okafor's people confirmed what Sturgis had told her about the shape of the thing. 12 million and change 5 hospitals, plus Fairmont County veterans routed to them and their records manipulated after they died. Renner at the center drawing the biggest share protected by falsified inspections, he signed himself. Pike had been Doyle. Voss was Renner, and threaded through it in a way that made Sturgis go quiet for a long moment was a name he knew, a colonel 2 states over named Barrett, who had been paid to steer military casualties toward the network's hospitals, and who had been, until that week, a man Sturgis would have called a friend. He took money to send wounded soldiers to slaughterhouses, Sturgis said, and set the tablet down very carefully. Like if he set it down hard, he might do something with his hands. He would regret. 15 years I served near that man. You could not have known, Reese said. I should have. Nobody knows until they know, she said, and heard, 3 years too late. And from her own mouth, the exact words a colonel had once said to her in a plywood room after a boy named Marsh had died. You taught me that, she added, when I could not stop counting the one I lost. You told me I could not carry every death and stay standing. You do not get to keep it from yourself now. Sturgis looked at her a long time and did not answer, which was its own kind of answer. The offer came the same day, formal and absurd. Fairmont County, gutted of its director and half its administration overnight, needed someone to run the emergency department and the interim board, sweating under federal scrutiny and desperate to be seen doing something clean, wanted the veteran whose incident reports had blown the whole thing open. Reese read the letter twice. The title, the salary which made her night nurse wages look like bus fare, the authority. I am a medic, she said, not an administrator. You ran a casualty collection point alone for 4 hours under fire, Sturgis said. You have managed worse rooms than this one, with nothing but a tourniquet and a hard voice. The bullets were the only thing about that job that was harder than this one. Do not tell me you cannot run a civilian department. She did not answer him that day. She went to see Drager instead. He was sitting up, color back sharp under the pain enough to give her grief. Heard they offered you Doyle's chair, he said. Haven't answered. Why the hell not? Because I am not sure I am the person for it. You saved my life twice, and you documented crimes that got a fraud ring cracked open, and you stood up to a man who was firing you. As he was firing you, Drager said. If you are not the person for it, there is no person for it. He shifted and winced. You know what I remember most about that valley? Not the fire. Not the leg. I remember you telling me a story about a dog while my life was running out on the floor, so I would have something to hold on to that was not fear. That is the whole job of running a room like this. Give people something to hold on to while everything goes wrong. He met her eyes. You have been doing it your entire life. Stop pretending you are just a night nurse hiding in the dark. The next days went hard and fast. She took the job in the end and made the board swallow 3 conditions to get her hiring and firing without their sign-off, no administrative hand in medical decisions, and full advocacy for every veteran who came through the doors. And then the network, which did not fold quietly, began to do exactly what Sturgis had promised. The motion came first, filed by lawyers she had never met, seeking to strip her nursing license on the grounds of mental instability arising from untreated combat trauma. The supporting evidence was 3 years of classified reports documenting her exposure to the worst days of her life, weaponized and printed out. Everything she had buried dragged into the light and turned against her. Then the leaks, a story that painted her as a government asset planted in the hospital to manufacture a case. Photographs of her in uniform, records half redacted and half not, comments beneath them from strangers, calling for her resignation, one of them threatening worse. Then the word, murderer, dripping red down the side of her old sedan in the employee lot, while the day shift filed past and lifted their phones. She stood and looked at it, at the paint running like something worse than paint, and Sturgis came up beside her. Police report, he said. Won't matter, she said. They want me scared. Is it working? Reese reached into her coat and closed her hand around the coin, brass worn to glass, the call sign under her thumb that the Army had spent years pretending it never issued. No, she said. It is making me angry. Through it all, one small, clean thing held. Sam Ortega came to her office on the second day of the worst of it, pale and set-jawed, and put her phone on the desk with the note still on the screen, date and name, and everything Kessler had asked her to sign that she had not seen. "I want to give it to the FBI," Sam said. "The real thing, not the copy. I know what it might do to me here." She swallowed. "But you said I did not have to win the fight tonight. I just had to not lose it." She looked up. "This is me not losing it." Reese looked at the girl for a long moment. This new graduate, who 3 weeks off orientation, had held her ground in a dark hallway, and had now decided with her eyes open to do the harder right thing at real cost to herself. It was the 6 she had saved, and the 1 she had not all folded into one 23-year-old with a cardigan and a phone. "Okay," Reese said, and her voice came out rougher than she meant. "Okay. We will do it together. You will not stand in that room alone." Sam nodded, and something in her face steadied, and Reese understood that whatever else the network took from her, before this was done, it was not going to take this. The girl was going to be all right. Better than all right. She was going to be exactly the kind of nurse this place had spent 7 months trying to grind out of existence, and she was going to survive being one. That evening, Okafor called. "We cracked the encrypted files off Renner's home machine," she said. "Payment ledger, 4 years of it." "Reese, you need to come in. There is a name on it you are going to want to see for yourself." The name on the ledger was Barrett. Reese read it 3 times in the Federal Building's cold conference room, while Sturgis stood very still beside her and did not say anything at all. 3 payments over 18 months routed through 2 shell companies into an account that belonged to the colonel he had served near for 15 years. There was no ambiguity in it. There was no reading that made it something other than what it was. He steered them, Okafor said quietly. Casualties routed to network hospitals, where the billing could be inflated after they died. We are still working out whether Drager's transport last night was part of it, or whether he ended up at Fairmont by accident. Either way, Barrett took the money. Sturgis put both hands flat on the table and looked at them like they belonged to someone else. Then he straightened, and when he spoke, his voice had gone level in the way Reese had learned to recognize as the sound of a man deciding to keep standing. "Bring him in," he said. "All the way in. I do not care what it costs the uniform." He looked at Reese. "You were right. I do not get to keep it from myself." They brought Barrett in at dawn. He talked before noon because men who sell out for money almost always do. And what he traded for a lighter sentence was the last piece nobody had been able to place. The woman who had called herself Sharon Frost had a name and a history and a role, and once she had a name, the whole apparatus of the federal government turned toward her. And 11 days later, they took her out of a rented house 4 states away without a shot fired. She was the one who had walked into a holding room and closed a loose end and dressed it as oversight. She was not going to close anymore. The deposition happened on a cold, clear Friday 2 weeks after the storm. Reese wore the first real suit she had owned since the Army dark gray, the coin in the inside pocket where nobody could see it, the plate in her forearm aching under the sleeve in the cold. There were snipers on the roof of the Federal Building, and dogs in the lobby, and a perimeter that made it very clear somebody took the threat seriously. She walked through all of it with her hands steady, because they were always steady, and sat down across a long table from 3 lawyers who had been bred in glass towers and fed on billable hours. For an hour, the lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Westbrook, asked her ordinary questions, background training service. She answered each one plainly. Then he changed his angle the way she had known he would. "You have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder," he said. "You have sought treatment. Would you say your experiences affected your perception of events, your judgment?" Okafor started to object. Reese put a hand flat on the table, and she did not raise her voice, and she leaned forward just slightly into the recorder. "I will answer that," she said. "Yes, I have been diagnosed. Yes, I am treating it. And yes, my experiences affected my judgment. They taught me to tell when a man is bleeding into his own belly by the way the wall of it goes tight under my hand. They taught me to hear a monitor going wrong from 3 rooms away. They taught me to keep working with a plate in my arm and my ears ringing so hard I could not hear my own voice, because 6 men were going to live or die based on whether I kept working. She held his eyes. You can put my worst days on the record all you want, Mr. Westbrook, but every one of them made me better at the thing I was doing the night your client's network nearly killed a decorated officer to save on an operating room. So let us talk about judgment. Let us talk about whose. Westbrook's smile stayed put but stopped meaning anything. Then the door opened. They came in a few at a time because the room was not built for how many of them there were. 12 soldiers in dress uniform, 8 who had served with her, and 4 who had served with Draeger, and watched her work in a valley they were not allowed to name. A staff sergeant with 4 arms like bridge cable, who stood and said for the record, and under no oath at all, that he had watched Sergeant Calloway run a casualty point alone under fire for 4 hours, and that if she said a thing was true, he would put his life on it, and had. One after another, they said their piece, not the polished testimony of trained witnesses, but the flat plain weight of people who had been there, which no cross-examination on earth knows how to touch, and last a young woman in the uniform of a corporal who had not been in the valley, who was too young to have been stepped up to the table. She was maybe 23, with a face Reese's whole body recognized, before her mind caught up. Corporal Gina Marsh, she said. My brother was Specialist Eli Marsh. The room went very quiet. Reese could not make herself breathe. I joined up after he died, Jaina said. Wanted to finish the thing he started. Major Draeger told me you were the medic who was with Eli at the end. She reached into her breast pocket and drew out something small and worn a brass lensatic compass, its case scratched to a dull shine by years, in a pocket that was not hers. My parents gave me this when I deployed, she said. It was his. But I have been carrying it, and I think it was always supposed to end up with you. She set it on the table and slid it across, and Reese put out a hand that was, for the second time in her life, not steady at all, and closed it over the compass. We do not blame you, Gina said, and her voice cracked and held. He wrote home about you. The medic who made everybody feel safe, who told stupid jokes in the worst places. He talked about you in the last letter he ever sent. We know you did everything a person could do. We have known it for 3 years. She swallowed. We just needed you to know it too. Westbrook asked for a recess and did not get one. Okafor slid a tablet across the table with a photograph on it. Westbrook's own firm receiving $300,000 from a shell company tied to Renner 2 weeks before he agreed to take the case, and after that, the men in the glass suits stopped asking questions about anyone's judgment but their own. Federal agents took Westbrook out in handcuffs before the hour was up. Renner's people fell like a line of dominoes over the following months, and the woman without a name went to a cell. She would not leave, and the network that had turned dead soldiers into invoices came apart one ledger line at a time. Reese kept the compass in her pocket after that on the opposite side from the coin. One for the man she had saved twice, and the promise the army did not forget its own. One for the boy she had not saved, and the family who had carried her forgiveness for 3 years, waiting for a chance to hand it back. She ran the department. She rebuilt it slowly, the way you rebuild anything worth having, one honest hire, and one working monitor, and one clean chart at a time. Marlene Tobin took an early retirement she did not fight. Preston Vale, to the surprise of everyone including himself, asked to stay and be better, and Reese let him on probation on the condition that the next time a nurse told him something was wrong, he listened. Sam Ortega finished her first year and her second, and became precisely the kind of nurse the place had once tried to break, and never once signed a chart for care she had not seen. A year on the Marsh family started a foundation in Eli's name to help combat medics find their footing in civilian medicine, and they asked Reese to sit on the board, and she said yes before her voice could talk her out of it. Draeger's team threw her a welcome that was not optional and that she pretended to hate. Sturgis, before he retired, put her name in for a program that trained the next generation of medics, not just to save lives, but to survive having saved them. And she told him she would think about it. And this time, she meant she probably would. She had learned a thing in 3 years of hiding, and the harder year of being found. You cannot save everyone. Some people die despite everything your hands know how to do. Some systems are too rotten to fix from the inside, and some fights are too big to win alone. But you stand up anyway. Not because you will win, not because anyone will thank you, but because there is a difference between the people who see a thing broken and fix it, and the people who watch it break. And she had spent long enough on the wrong side of that line. She had been dismissed as just a nurse, just a veteran, just a quiet woman on the worst shift in the worst hospital in a town nobody drove to on purpose. And she had learned that just was the most dangerous word anybody had ever used on her, because there was nothing just about standing up when the whole room stayed seated, and nothing just about hearing the one sound that did not belong and walking toward it instead of away. Her hands were steady. They had always been steady. It had only taken her 3 years and 1 ice storm to understand that the steadiness had never been the thing worth hiding. If you made it all the way here with Reese Calloway, do me one favor before you go. The past does not get to decide who you become. It only hands you the tools, and what you build with them is yours. Hit that like button, subscribe if this one stayed with you, and share it with someone who needs to hear that being underestimated is not the same as being finished. And tell me in the comments from whatever city you are watching in, what would you have done if you were the one crossing that frozen parking lot when the rotors came in low? I read every one, and I want to know how far this story travels.